Start? Yeah. Okay. All right. Just wanted to make sure I should start. Welcome everyone to our town hall. I'm really happy to have you on Zoom, but here. I want to take a minute to introduce all of the members of our panel tonight. So I'm Daniela Steinberg. I'm the head of school at HLA. We have John Rosenberg. He's our Chief Executive Officer. We have Emily Fernandez. She is our Chief Schools Officer. And we have Jonathan Worley, and he's our Chief Operating Officer. So I have the pleasure of spending this time with the Hebrew Public team, and we're here to give you some information about our school year and some of our plans. Next slide, please. So just to let you know what we'll be speaking about this evening, we're going to give you a recap of some of our responses to COVID-19 and what we've learned through this journey. We'll talk about our plans for spring reopening, and then we'll look ahead to some future planning for summer and of course the next school year. I'm going to pass it over to John.
Thank you, Daniela, and welcome to all of our attendees. A number of you on already. I know more folks will be joining as we go through the hour. I want to start by just acknowledging what a challenging and in many ways tragic year this has been for all of our communities. And I want to just share condolences and our sense of caring for the entire community. We know that there have been losses and grief and illness, but also hope. And now that we're a full year in to this pandemic, I think we're all beginning to see the light at the end of the tunnel and a sense of gradually, at least, approaching a sense of normalcy. As you'll hear tonight, we have really tried, both as HLA and as a small network of Hebrew public schools, to stick to our values and our mission and to really just do everything that we can to take care of children, to take care of our staff, to provide supports for families. And we hope that those of you who are members of our community have seen that this year. If I can have the next slide, please. Okay, so I'm going to now turn it over to one of my colleagues to walk us through a brief recap of our response thus far to COVID. Emily Fernandez, our Chief Schools Officer.
Great, thank you, John. And I echo everything that John shared, and I'll just say I think the HLA community is really special, and being able to be in your building last week and in your remote classes over the past few months has been really special, and I see HLA together coming to life every time I interact with the folks from this school. So I'm excited to be here tonight and just share a little bit with everyone. So a brief recap of our process and since last March, just about a full year. Timeline of school closure. We did close all of our schools March 13th, and we were able to start with classes that Monday. We started classes, so we were able to not miss any days of instruction. We were able to begin distributing technology and make sure that every student had a laptop or a device at home March 17th. We also were able to do some really neat things to kind of bring community back to our lives after we became so separated. So you'll see Camp Hebrew Public kicked off that summer last year. And so this was any number of really unique experiences for children online where they could connect with kids from all of our schools, our network schools in New York and Philadelphia, as well as our affiliate schools and families across the country, with a focus on Hebrew language and Israeli experiences. And in the fall, in September, we were able to reopen. And I think this is one of the things that was both challenging and unique for us, is that as a charter school, we had the choice to determine whether or not we were going to reopen in person and offer in person for kids. And we did choose to. And we did so successfully and safely for a good amount of time. And of course, we also gave families the choice between a hybrid or a remote model, so that those families that wanted to stay home or needed to stay home had that option with us. We then closed in December, and that was a really challenging decision based on just the rising rates at that time, anticipating holiday travel and household combination over the holidays, and what we were starting to see where we were having to close our schools and reopen them. And I know the HLA community experienced that a number of times where we had to close for a week, 2 weeks, or we had to close a classroom. And we were finding that we weren't able to maintain consistency. So we stepped back and we closed. And now here we are again, having just reopened the building for children last Monday, a week ago today, and to talk to you a little bit about what you can expect this spring. Next slide, please. Great. So a bit about, our education. I talked some about the fact that we had these two programs offered. That was really critical for us. We do believe that choice is important for families, and we want to make sure that the two choices they had were robust. Some of our colleagues or schools across the city or country have had the remote option for students be simply zooming in or videoing into a classroom where a teacher is teaching in the building and the student is at home, trying to connect with the teacher, trying to connect with other students. And we understand why people made those choices. And I think some folks are able to do that quite well. We didn't think it was good enough. And so we devoted consistent staff. We started out partnering with HLA 2, but then after about a month and a half, shifted to strictly HLA teachers teaching our HLA students at home. So a child who is in remote always has a dedicated teacher who is just teaching their remote class. We think that's important for relationships, for quality of instruction. They can do much, much more if they're only teaching a Zoom class as opposed to also trying to manage children in desks around a classroom. And so we think that's critical. Our hybrid program, we also did a lot of planning going into that with a focus in both of the programs. And I'll say a little bit about this in the future part of this presentation, but a focus on individual student data and small group instruction where we could. So whenever we could get an additional staff member into the classroom, splitting the class into smaller groups, smaller sizes, so kids could get individual attention. We know that we've lost some ground academically, emotionally, kids are going through a lot. And so wherever we can get individual attention, one-on-one, small group, even if there's a class around, we're trying to do that. We also, as I mentioned, we were able to kick off Network Academy, enrichment Hebrew courses that were offered after school hours, some really neat special interest courses from cooking to read alouds in Hebrew, just absolutely beautiful courses where we've had really, really great participation. And I think social connection is one of the things we've all missed during this time. And this was an opportunity to maintain that. And that's not even getting to what Daniela and her team did at HLA. And we'll talk a little bit about that, be it community meetings or movie nights or parent paint and sips with over 50 plus parents painting. That was just a week or two ago, I think. But Network Academy was one way to create that community while infusing Hebrew and really make this connection for kids and families. We also were able to really support our families with childcare. So John led a huge charge with this, John Rosenberg, around childcare and providing options for our families who needed childcare so that families could go back to work. We were the only charter network in New York City to do this. Our partnership was with the Kings Bay Y at HLA. And so families who needed childcare during the day so that their kids could either do the asynchronous or remote learning days of hybrid, or so that they could do their entire remote learning program in a safe place that they could trust, were able to. And we subsidized it. So families were able to apply for scholarships, and we were able to take some of that burden off of families. I know as a mom of two myself, how critical that would be to know that my kids could be in a safe environment, partnered with my school, and I would be able to go back to work. So those were some of the big things that we did this fall and as well as the spring. Just if we could go to the next slide, just a couple of fun photos here from our Network Academy. You'll see Ms. Bosmat from our very own HLA, our incredible dance teacher, leading sessions there from her home. It was really remarkable, and you see the joy on the instructors' faces there, but the joy was palpable in the Zoom rooms during this time. So it was really a lovely, lovely part that we were able to add in. Okay, I'm going to hand it over to Jonathan to just recap a little bit our response in the health and safety area. If that was the programmatic side, I want to give it to my partner, our Chief Operating Officer, Jonathan.
Awesome. Thank you, Emily. Hi, everyone. I am really, really excited to be here talking about reopening HLA. I had the opportunity to be in the school on Friday, and it's just really palpable, like seeing the kids' faces and just like we're taking a step towards normalcy, and that feels really good. And so thank you for joining us tonight. And I'm going to talk a little bit, as Emily mentioned, I'm going to talk a bit about our experience operating schools during a pandemic, a little bit about what we've learned, and some of what is going to be slightly different this time around. So first of all, our overriding focus, as John noted, really is and will continue to be the health and safety of our staff and students, and supporting our students. And so as Emily mentioned, and as you know, we had to shift to fully remote in December. We didn't do that because what we are doing in schools operationally wasn't working. We made the decisions for the reasons that Emily noted. We wanted to take a pause while COVID spread in the community was increasing, and make sure that everyone was going to continue to be safe, and also take a break from the instability that opening and closing can create. We're now at a point where we think it is, we're ready to have students back in school buildings, and part of what's influenced that decision is really taking a moment to reflect on what our direct experience has been over the past year now of running schools in a pandemic. So a couple things about what we've learned. One of the first things that we learned is really there's no evidence that anyone caught COVID in any of our schools. Transmission does not appear to have happened in any of our schools. And a big part of this is that our protocols do seem to be working. And I'll talk a little bit more about, our approach and this idea of layered mitigation in a moment. One example, though, is, we do site-based COVID testing, as many of you know, and we were able to, before we had to shift to remote, identify some people who tested positive but were asymptomatic. That allowed us to pull them out of our schools and make sure that, they didn't have the opportunity, there wasn't an opportunity for COVID to spread. I also want to note that, leaning into our OLAM values, all along the way, aware communication has really been critical, and that's very much due to the work of our staff and of our families, making sure that we are communicating about our experience, about, is a student or a staff member not feeling well on a given day, and all together us, being able to communicate about our experience and how we can operationally make things move has helped us create kind of a safer environment. Can we go to the next slide, please? So in addition to looking at our own experience, we're constantly looking at research and guidance from federal and state agencies to understand what we can do better, and what we should be, how we should be making our decisions. In doing that, one of the main bottom lines is that research right now is showing that provided we take the necessary steps, we can reopen safely for in-person learning right now. And so we feel that we are doing the right thing right now. A couple kind of key points from some of the research that has come up since the last time we all talked. One is that children are much less likely to spread COVID and are far less susceptible to COVID. This isn't to say that children cannot catch COVID and it can't be serious, but it is much rarer, and the cases are few and far between. In addition, and again, I'm going to speak a little bit more about our layered mitigation, but all the kind of protocols and initiatives that we take in improved ventilation, mask wearing, things like that, when put in place, really do reduce transmission risk and create a safer environment. And then finally, even in communities that have high rates of COVID, which our community has had in the past, schools that follow these protocols and are applying them really do have a small risk of transmission. All right, so I am going to now hand it back off to Ms. Steinberg, and she's going to speak a little bit about our reopening plans.
Thank you, Jonathan, someone that is on our speed dial and has supported us greatly, greatly through all of this. We really appreciate it. So yeah, I want to talk a little bit about what we've done and our reopening, which a few people mentioned has been very joyous to see kids in the building. They're just so happy to be in school. Our teachers are so happy to receive them, and it's just been a nice experience, and definitely feeling a little bit more normal while still being really careful and cautious. So just to give you an overview of what we've been doing, so we did return to in-person learning for grades K to 4. We did that on March 15th, so just last week. And that what we were able to do was we had kindergarten in person 4 days all along. But before this, we were not able to offer more than 2 days to the other grades. When we opened on March 15th, with some shifts and changes and adding some staff, and we were thankfully able to offer 4 days a week for grades K through 4. And so we offered our lower school more of a full-time experience. And that's been very, very positive. We also, just to give you a little perspective, we chose to open a little earlier. We opened on March 15th to give them, it's really 2 weeks of kind of before the break, just really getting kids back into a routine, getting them used to being back in school, kind of resetting the culture. Giving them an opportunity to get to know their teachers again, get to know their classmates. And it's been going really well. So I'm happy to report that families seem happy, and overall it's been a good experience. Thinking about after the break. So after the break on April 12th, I'm really happy to share that we are able to offer 4 days also for grades 5 and 6, which is a very new breakthrough. It's also it's tough, but we were able to shift things around again and do the best we can to offer more days for kids. So we have prioritized grades 5 and 6. Unfortunately, we are not able to give 7 and 8 all that due to staffing and space. But it's definitely exciting that we're able to bring grades 5 and 6 back for 4 days. Grade 7 and 8 will remain doing the same thing that they've been doing. They're used to it. It'll be cohort A and B. No teacher changes or schedule changes. We'll just leave it as it is, except if kids have switched models, and if that's the case, they'll come to school. So that's kind of where we are in terms of reopening, and it's just very positive to share. And everything else is kind of staying the same. We're doing our testing, social distance, masks. Actually, everyone, all the faces on this panel have been at our school in the past week, and it's been really nice to just share the joy of being back. Let's go to the next slide, please. I'm gonna pass it over to Emily.
Great, thank you. So I spoke a little bit about this, but we are really focusing on student progress. So following spring break, we're finished this week, then we have spring break, and then we have 12 full weeks of school with every HLA student. And we're really focusing on what progress we can make with them academically, socially, and emotionally in those 12 weeks. So a couple things about our program. One, as I noted earlier, our remote only cohorts have consistent HLA staff dedicated to them who strictly teach remote students and who are not juggling both a remote class or a remote student and an in-person student at the same time. We are able to offer full in-person day for 4 days a week for K6. And one really wonderful thing that Daniela, I can't take any credit for this, that Daniela and her team have been able to do is open the building earlier with this second round of reopening so that our youngest kids can come in at an earlier time and be supervised, and families can go on about their day, go to work, take care of other family members. We know that that was a strain. And so she was able to rearrange things and stretch out to really provide pretty much a full day for our kids, which was pretty exciting. Hebrew small group for every child every week. So we've maintained that from the beginning of when we closed. I think schools across the country have had to make some pretty tough choices about what they cut. And the things that often get cut are language, arts, connection. And we said this was a non-negotiable. And so since March, we have consistently offered Hebrew and been able to do it in small group settings remotely. So kids are still learning that every single child, every single week. Okay, this next bullet, I talked briefly about it earlier, but I just want to talk about this for a moment. Um, One of the things that we focus on is how we get really clear on what kids know and what they don't know. This is true any year. It is that much more important right now, because kids are at wildly differing places, and just teaching to the whole group one standard lesson is not going to be as successful as we need it to be. So we are looking at individual academic data frequently with our teachers. We just had a huge professional development session last Wednesday, with our senior director of curriculum instruction, who collaborated with our assistant head of school for middle and our assistant head of school for lower school, Maria Rosen and John Richardson. And they did a whole session with the teachers on studying academic data, where each child is, and then working with teachers. Okay, how do you translate that to class? How do you make sure if Daniela is working on X, that she gets coaching on X in class? And so that's been a big focus, as well as building in small groups wherever possible. We're also pretty closely monitoring attendance, student attendance, and figuring out how to individually support kids and families. We know that attendance to school is critical right now, be it in a Zoom classroom, where you're making connections and learning over the screen, or in person. And so we've really been trying to partner with families, because it's a critical piece as we head into the spring and begin considering next year. And lastly, we're also continuing to focus on what it looks like to build community and create space for social emotional learning. So I think all of us of all ages have experienced some emotional trauma and damage, wear and tear in the past year. And certainly that's true for our kiddos. They show it differently, but they have had a tough time of it. So again, the same way that we would want to prioritize Hebrew and make sure we have Hebrew small groups every single week for every single child, we also want to maintain social emotional spaces. So you may have seen your kids at large community meetings on Zoom, which are super cool, or assemblies. I didn't even know we could do assemblies over the computer before all of this, but they're really meaningful. We're continuing with morning media advisory, which is just that routine of every day, every child has a connection with their class, that's not based in academics, as much as I just talked about that's based in the heart and based in them as individuals. And then a lot of really neat community events during the day, after the school day. I think since Danielle has stepped into this role, she's made a big priority of connecting with families in the community. And I think we've all seen that. And I think it's a really powerful part of what we're able to do. So next slide. As with before, for our reopening health safety protocols and procedures, I'm going to hand it back to Jonathan.
Thank you. So I'm just going to do a little refresher on kind of what are our guiding principles for health and safety, speak a little bit about our protocols that we have in place, as well as some of the changes and adjustments that we've made to those. This should all be pretty familiar for anyone who has participated in the hybrid program so far. These are the kind of layers of mitigation, and I'll talk about kind of that concept in a second, but the different initiatives that we are undertaking to ensure that we have a safe school space. One, of course, social distancing. Can we go back just for 1 second? Just going to run through these. Social distancing, maintaining 6-foot separation between all people whenever possible, when we can in the school. Personal protective equipment, key to that, of course, is mask wearing. Everyone who is in the building, staff, students, must wear a mask at all times, with few exceptions around like eating and drinking. The concept of batching, of course, within a classroom, we try to make sure that that class has minimal exposure to outside of that group of people. Of course, the idea being to, if there is unfortunate spread within one batch, it's not going to pass to others. Screening and cleaning, for those of you who have participated in our hybrid program, you're probably familiar with our screening app, Ruvna. Everyone's expected to give a health screening every day for their students, the staff as well. We also are taking temperature at the door. We also have staff who are making sure that if anybody is exhibiting any symptoms, that we're going to check with the nurse. Cleaning, of course, we have strong cleaning protocols in place. I was just there on Friday, watching our custodial team go up and down the stairs, wiping banisters in the middle of the day over and over again. It is, we are trying to keep a disinfected and clean environment. Environmental management, here we're talking about air, ventilation, airflow, air sanitation, sanitization. We, at HLA, we have reviewed our HVAC system and made sure that we're pulling fresh air as well as possible, that we have good airflow. We've added ionization units, which help do another extra layer of filtering. We're also encouraging our teachers to open windows wherever possible and whenever possible. And then finally, more on the kind of new end of things, vaccines are now available, and Hebrew Public is strongly encouraging our staff to get vaccinated. I'm going to speak a little bit more about that in a second. And of course, we have regular testing of our staff and our students, so we, are constantly taking a check on the health and welfare of our community. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Some of these I've mentioned, but I'm just going to call out a couple of the things that are a little bit different with this reopening than we had prior to December. Testing this time around is mandatory for staff and students. It was mandatory for staff before. Now, as you may know, all students who are participating in our hybrid program have to consent to testing. This is not testing every day. This is not testing even once a week necessarily. We are doing a mix of randomized and rotating, but testing so we get to every student eventually. This, as I said before, this has helped us in the past to identify cases where we wouldn't have otherwise known, and can help us stem potential spread. As I mentioned, we are encouraging our staff to get vaccinated. We think that will help create a safer environment, and we have seen an increasing number of staff being vaccinated. I do want to note, part of our kind of internal campaign to encourage vaccination and to help our community learn more about what the vaccines are. This week on Thursday, we are holding an information panel with a couple of doctors who are experts in the field. We're going to answer questions about the vaccines and give some information about their experiences. If you haven't received an invitation for that, keep an eye on your emails and your texts. We are going to be sending out reminders for that. That is on Thursday at 6 p.m. And then finally, one thing that is going to be a little bit different this year, previously, or this time around, previously when we had multiple cases in a school, we were following Department of Education protocols, which in most every case would lead to closure of the entire school. This time around, we are going to be taking a more thoughtful, considered approach to positive cases, and we're going to work with the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene to help us assess what we need to do. This is not to say, if we have a case within a cohort, within a class, we're still going to be following the recommended protocols around quarantine. So that class may be asked to quarantine. But when it comes to the entire school closure, we're going to be working closely with the Department of Health to be more considerate rather than to be reactive to just simply numbers. And I think with that, I am going to hand it back over to, oh no, sorry, I just want to make one more note. So I talked about this idea of layered mitigation. I just wanted to share this image to kind of give a better idea of why it's important, and also why we are both reliant on and thankful for all of the work that our staff and our students, and by extension our families, are doing to help keep a safe environment. What you're seeing here is this idea of the Swiss cheese model of mitigation. Just really quickly, in this image, each of these slices of cheese represents one of those kind of protocols or initiatives that we've been taking to try to create a healthy environment. Individually, they're all critical, but individually, none of them are perfect. And so the idea being, you take a piece of Swiss cheese, there are some holes in that Swiss cheese. So for example, we mandate masks. Masks are a great protection against spread of COVID. However, there's holes, there's possibilities that it's not perfect. Some of that, the chance of spread makes its way through those holes. You put up another slice of cheese, and that's social distancing. You're going to hit the cheese with some things that got through, but you're also going to hit a few of the holes, but fewer things are getting through now. You add another, fewer and fewer chances of spread are happening. And so it's really critical for us that we have all of these things in place, and that people are really sticking to them and doing what is needed. And I really, again, want to thank our families for encouraging their children to participate in this and help us, and thank our staff who have been great in helping us maintain all these layers of mitigation to a point where we feel we have as safe an environment as we possibly can. All right, I am now going to hand it back off to Emily, and she's going to talk a bit about state assessments.
Great. Thanks, Jonathan. So a very different type of testing, the New York State exams. So as you might be aware, Tuesday, March 16th, last week Tuesday, New York State released guidance on our state exams for grades 3 through 8. And this was after an unclear, we weren't sure what the outcome was going to be, whether or not they were going to waive whether the federal government was going to waive the requirement to have state assessments this year, and New York State had petitioned to not have them. And at this point, we are going to have them, and that's been made clear to us. And so we jumped right into planning mode to make sure that we would set up the most successful exam environment for our students as possible. A couple things that are different about this year. First of all, only students who attend class in person, only students who attend class in the building, our hybrid students, will be taking the exam. The state is not having any testing happening remotely for any students who are not in the building. So if your student is in the remote only cohort, you will not have an assessment this year. It will not be held against students in any way. It is simply a fact that they only are testing students that come into the building. So all of our hybrid students are eligible to be tested. We, as a school, as a network, are going to have what we call a dress rehearsal. So the week of April 12th, we're going to have a shorter kind of practice so that we give our kids a chance to, reacquaint themselves with that process if they're over 5th grade and up, or for our 3rd and 4th graders to get a sense of what it's like to take a state exam for the first time. Because since we did not have state exams last year, this is really brand new to our youngest testers, and we want to make sure they feel confident and prepared. And it also, frankly, gives our staff a chance to practice all of the logistics that go along with state exam testing. There's very clear protocols around how we handle the test booklets and answer sheets. And so we don't want anything to go wrong the day of. We'll have a dress rehearsal the week of April 12th. Our exams, we have ELA and math. We also have science, but that's coming a bit later, not until June. So our ELA exam will be on April 20th and 22nd, and our math exam will be on May 4th and May 6th. Okay, and we have those 2 days because although it is only 1 day of testing, so your child will only take a test one of those days, for our 7th and 8th grade students who are still going to be in Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday cohorts, we want to make sure we have 2 testing days there for them. There's been a lot of planning already in the last week, I can tell you, to make sure the school is set up to take care of your kids and take care of you as we step into this kind of unexpected twist in a year of unexpected twists. And tomorrow you're going to receive a letter with much more information, including an FAQ, including specific dates, schedules, all of it. What I'll note there is, I have spoken with some families who understandably in some way want to have their child not participate in this test. They might feel that, they didn't get the full year of school, or this is unfair to them in some way. And we absolutely respect any family's choice in this matter. And there's a way to go through a process to opt out, and that's part of the letter. I do want families to know, though, that one, this assessment is not going to contribute to their grades, the report card grades, to whether or not a student is promoted or retained or held back. This assessment is not going to affect your child in their academic kind of legacy of elementary school and middle school at all. And two, please know that the HLA staff is doing everything possible. Hebrew Public Network staff, we're doing everything possible to make this a calm, almost enjoyable, safe environment where kids can feel confident and try their best and show what they know without a huge pressure on them. We know that this year has been unique. So know that we are doing that. And certainly Danielle and her team are open to questions as you get that letter tomorrow. You read the FAQs, reach out to the team, they're ready to answer. Okay, next slide.
Okay, so thank you, Emily. One of the things, of course, now that you've heard about our plans for the spring and a recap of what's happened so far this year, everyone, I'm sure, is curious about what's next, what comes around the bend. So we did want to give you a bit of a preview in looking ahead to the summer of 2021 and next school year, the 21-22 school year. If you move to the next slide, please, Lauren. So I think that the biggest headline is this. This was a pandemic, unpredictable. There's been tremendous panic and then learning and then more learning. And we have really tried to not overcommit and underdeliver. So please understand that when I say that we predict a full-time return to school almost like normal, almost like a typical year, there are things that we, of course, can't control. We can't control what new research might tell schools to do. We can't control what government directives might be handed down to us. We can't control whether there might be another surge in the pandemic, but we are very, very close to the research on this. And given vaccine effectiveness, given the effectiveness of all of the health and safety protocols that we're using and all the research about the low likelihood of transmission within schools, our current planning is that we fully anticipate that for the 21-22 school year, it will be 5 days a week in-person learning for all children. It is also quite possible that we will have, at least for the first part of the year, some of the current protocols still in effect around things like mask wearing. I wish that weren't the case. I think it's likely to be the case for some period of time. But we really firmly believe that we'll be able to welcome your children back, as well as new children coming into HLA full-time in person. We also know that from the experience of this school year, children and families have experienced new needs, new gaps in ways that are almost unprecedented. So part of our focus in looking towards the summer is how do we use that summer period effectively? How do we stretch our dollars and our program offerings in ways that address the kinds of gaps that children might have experienced during the school year and really going back over the entire last year? Gaps around socialization. What does it mean to be a kindergartner this year and perhaps never have set foot in a building with your peers? Gaps in terms of academic learning that go beyond what we might typically do with a summer school program. Gaps in some cases, and sadly, in terms of trauma that children might have experienced. So I'm going to hand it back to Emily Fernandez to speak a little bit about that in terms of our summer plan.
Great. So this has been a real exciting way that we hope to support some of those gaps that John was just talking about. Right now, we are exploring partnerships with a whole host of organizations to tackle this, from one-on-one or small group academic tutoring to really focus on kids who are seeing some academic need, significant academic need, and the idea that this will give them a step up as they head into the fall, as opposed to a step back from 2 months of summer and not having school. So how can we maintain where they are and potentially get them like a little further ahead before they come back to school in September? We're also looking at what counseling could look like for some of our kids who are struggling emotionally, families who are experiencing some emotional challenges, and what that might look like. We've also explored and are really hopeful that we'll be able to offer for some of our most high need individual students a time at Ramapo, where a camp where they are staying away for several weeks and getting some kind of intense wraparound support, and also some incredible just experiences and learning in a new space. And so, and the other piece I would say here is we're also looking at just good old-fashioned summer camp and what it looks like to give kids a chance to interact with each other, play, learn, be outside, be safe, and which is really unique and we're excited about, have continued exposure to Hebrew. So we're partnering with summer camps that are already in existence and looking at how to push in a Hebrew immersion portion. So could they have Hebrew an hour a day during a 3-week stint at summer camp in one of New York City's greatest parks, right? So how we can get Hebrew into our summer program as well, that is actually already pretty certain that we'll be able to do that. And we're working on details of how we can invite folks and how we can open it up to the larger community that's going to come in the next month or so. But summer programming, usually a school, we really focus on kids September to June with maybe a bridge for our most academically at-risk students. But this is not a normal year and the needs are not normal. And so we are looking at how we actually focus on kids year round, and frankly, how we could continue these partnerships in the future beyond this year. But this year is spurred by the needs that we're seeing. Next slide, please. So I want to hand it back to Daniela, who has already been fervently planning ahead for September. Daniela, why don't you share some of the thinking that's in the books?
Thank you, Emily. I just want to add on really quick to what Emily was sharing, and everyone. Kids are going through a lot. I think we would all agree about that. And a lot of the planning, although some of it is academic for next year, it's really with the focus on like, how do we get kids back to normal? How do we get kids excited about coming to school? How do we get them excited for high school and things that we've all thought about before this pandemic, and it's kind of seemed to fall to the wayside. So I'm really excited to share that, we are planning a lot of great things for next year. And I also just want to mention that on April 14th, I'm going to have a talk at night with Dr. Annette Hernandez. She's a child psychologist, a clinical psychologist, and we're going to have a talk together. We'll send a flyer out soon, but you'll be able to ask questions, and she'll give a lot of families like tips on how to support your children through all the trauma that they've been through. And I think that'll be really nice. So look out for that. I hope you could join us for that as well. So previewing next year, we have locked in some 7th and 8th grade electives. So just what that looks like is that at around 2:00 every day, it'll be built into their schedule that 7th and 8th graders will have class of their choice. The form should be sent out tomorrow, so look out for that. So even as soon as tomorrow, your 6th or 7th grade child will choose their elective for the first half of next year. So it's going to be 2 parts. We are offering things like living environment for grade 8, which is a Regents class. For grade 7, we'll have STEM, which will be really fun and exciting. We're also going to offer pre-algebra, which will, for kids that have passion for math, it'll be like a second math. So they'll take their regular math during the day and they'll take pre-algebra, and that'll prepare them for algebra in grade 8, which is also a Regents class. We will have a debate team. When I was in school, it was called debate team, but it's a public speaking class. And we'll have creative writing, and we're also going to have studio art. And so that's for the artists, kids that are passionate about art, be able to do that. So we have a lot of exciting things planned for 7th and 8th graders. They are older. They are like the top of the class. They are this, the special group that gets this extra exciting academic opportunity as they prepare for high school. So I'm excited about that. Additionally, as we've shared, we are going to offer a free after-school program daily, with the exception of Friday, until 6:00 for grades K through 5. It'll be staffed by our own teachers, and they will provide homework help, also reading groups, so that'll support academics. And that'll be differentiated based on kids' levels, and so we'll group them that way. And they'll also do some activities, have a snack, and it'll just be a fun time for families that would like to pick their kids up a little bit later. And so we'll have kids until 6:00 at no cost. So I'm really excited about that. I'm also planning at 7:30 daily to have a kind of like an intervention for kids that are maybe a little bit behind in reading, which is many kids during the pandemic. And we just want to build that into our day. And so you'll hear more about that as we get closer, but we'll have lots of staff offering a reading group at 7:30. And that'll be an opportunity to get kids up to grade level in reading in a very calm, joyous way, where it's just an extra class with teachers that they really like. And I think it'll go a long way. Also, can't wait to get back to sports, and I'm sure many of your kids can't wait. So we're going to go back to full sports. If you're familiar with that, it's basketball, volleyball, 3 seasons. And we're also brand new. We're going to have a step team, sort of like a cheerleading squad, but different because it's just cooler and more exciting and more of like a dance focus, open to all. And we're looking for a coach for that. So we're definitely going to have that. And that's going to be really like school spirit and lots of fun for kids to go to games and have a step team. So those are just some of the things that we are looking forward to for next year. Next slide, please. Right?
So some closing thoughts from the network's perspective. You know, I've been working in and around schools since 1995. Um, so, and this year again has really been unique. As a network, I think that being able to anchor ourselves in our values around problem solving and learning, including being a learning organization, and trying to communicate with people in a really clear and open way and listen, has made a difference this year. And I want to emphasize, we have not turned away from any of the things that we think make this school, HLA, and all of our schools special. The focus on modern Hebrew and Israel studies, the thinking about school as a community, our commitments to diversity and inclusion, and really trying to provide individualized help for every child, including the ways we've provided childcare this year, the summer activities that we're planning to, again, really get at student need on a very specific way. As part of our commitment to communication, we're including here again, and folks will have access to this presentation because we're recording it as well. Each of our email addresses, we really encourage you to reach out to us with any questions that you have. In some cases, we might direct you to someone, a teacher or another person who might have a more specific or relevant answer, but we are here. And those of you who've reached out to us know that we get back to you. We do our best to respond in a timely way. Daniela with school-specific questions. If you have questions about the Hebrew Public Instructional and Program Model, our Chief Schools Officer, Emily. If you have questions about health and safety and operations, Jonathan Worley. And if you have broad kind of mission or strategy questions about the sector, about what we're seeing in education, about the choices our organization makes, of course, feel free to reach out to me. We're grateful that you have entrusted us with your children and that you continue to be part of our HLA community. And if we go to the next slide, I just want to also remind folks that we're really hoping to relaunch our Capstone Israel trip as soon as travel is permitted again and we feel that it's safe. We're excited to have members of our 8th grade class go back to Israel for that week-long trip. And let me just hand it back to Daniela to close us out for tonight.
Thank you, John. I echo everything that John shared. Please communicate with us. We are here to answer questions. Sometimes it's something that seems overwhelming and then you just give us a call and it just becomes simple. And I just want to thank our community. This has been a very, very interesting year. We could not continue this without the support of our families. Every change, every update, every hiccup, we have your support. And it's really greatly appreciated. We know it's not easy. As a parent of 3, I know that the pandemic has been super challenging, and I just appreciate everyone really being willing to kind of roll with it. And we're really looking forward to better times with all of you, and I hope that we can share that very soon. And thank you for joining us tonight.
Thanks, everybody.